I've been looking around for salvation. I've been looking around for the truth. All around me I see frustration, and I looked all over till I found you. I sit and listen to your stories, and you're telling me, please don't worry. There's a lot in this world you should know, and loving life is where you should go. If you're looking for somewhere to go, if you're looking for someone to know, if you're looking for someone to guide you, then loving life will guide you.
Goeienaand, good evening, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world, and welcome to tonight's live stream. Wow, this is a very, very important subject. But before we get onto it, happy birthday to Garnet, whose birthday was yesterday. And please say a prayer for young Jarrett, who is tonight camping in the bush, halfway between Three Sisters and Beaufort West, in a very cold Great Karoo. Jarrett is entering the last phase of his walk of faith to Cape Town. Now, on another subject, the irony is not lost to me. There is a YouTuber who copied my format when it came to covering South Africa. When Loving Life was removed by YouTube a couple of months ago, he brought out a video gloating about the demise of the main Loving Life channel, showing absolutely no empathy. Last week, his channel with over 20,000 subscribers was removed by YouTube, and the gloat has now been replaced by, how did Scott Bolson do it? In other words, how did this channel mysteriously reappear 2 weeks later after being taken down by YouTube? Well, that's a question I would love to know the answer to as well. The difference is we had already made plans for such an event. The reason we have lovinglifetv.com, and I want everybody who has not yet gone and looked at that channel after this live stream to please go and look at lovinglifetv.com and register. All the old videos copied before the 3 channels were taken down by the feral YouTube were copied. So we actually have those, and they will be archived in months to come on our new platform. This other fellow didn't do any of this and has lost all his archive videos and has had to start again from scratch. Now, tonight's discussion is relevant to just about everyone who is watching. If you have a loan with a bank, be it a student loan, a housing loan, a commercial loan, a personal loan, or even a maxed out credit card, you are more than likely victim of a scam by your bank. The scam through the bank securitization process of your loan has now been exposed, and people like Greg Smith are fighting back. He's my guest tonight. Tonight I'm talking to Greg, who, unlike in our earlier discussions on foreclosure fraud by the banks, is not an outside expert. He has insight on the fraudulent process. He was an intended victim of the banks. Greg fought back against ABSA. I have a link in the description below this video to the earlier live stream about alleged securitization fraud involving the First National Bank. Tonight we unpack Greg's fight against alleged bank fraud through securitization of his loan. This is his story. Now, finally, please remember to subscribe to Loving Life on YouTube and to register on lovinglifetv.com, our new independent platform, because that is where we are transitioning to. Many other YouTubers are leaving YouTube and setting up their own websites. It's the only way to go, guys. You basically can't speak with integrity on YouTube without having the danger of your channel being taken down. Just be aware about that. That's why so many people are leaving. Okay, I'll get our guest Greg Smith on. Here we go. Hi, Greg.
Hey, hi, Scott.
How are you, buddy?
Can you hear me clearly?
I can hear you perfectly well. Perfectly well. Now,
Yeah.
you know what? What a journey you've been through, huh?
It's been incredible. In fact, this battle that I've had against ABSA Bank has been going on now for almost 5 years. In fact, the court case, when they applied to try and take my house in 2016, was in October 2016, when the judge dismissed their application for summary judgment. And since then, forget about COVID. This has been going on since 2016, back and forward, documentation, all sorts of evidence being presented. And these guys just persist in terms of trying to threaten, bully.
Well, I can understand, Greg, I can understand why, because ABSA already have a case against them in this particular area in the courts as a precedent. And if you win, it means that anyone who's got a loan that's in default can basically walk away from it because of the process that they have happening in the background. That's why they're shitting themselves. Let's face it. Now, let's get to the very nut of this. Please start by telling us about the loan you originally took out with ABSA. What was it for, and how long had you had it?
Look, essentially, I opened up an account with ABSA in 1996. Now, this is going to get quite interesting. If I digress slightly, forgive me, just stop me, whatever. But sure. I took out my original mortgage loan in 1996, October 1996. Now, what is interesting about that? So the account was opened in 1996. Now, ABSA don't even have amortizations for almost the first 2 years since the account was opened. So they start the account, they say it was opened in August of 1998. So they don't even get their basic calculations or amortization right.
Now, this account is a loan account, is it?
It's a mortgage loan account, basically, the collateral being obviously my property, which I've lived in for over 22 years.
Now, you're still living in that property right now as we speak to you.
I've paid over 1.2 million rand already on up until January 2020. I had an audit done on my account, in fact, and they found that there was overcharging. There is overcharging implicated at about 860,000, 870,000 rand.
Wow!
Simply because they've lost the first almost 2 years of my documents. They don't have any amortization whatsoever for it.
Right. Okay. Well,
so
yeah, carry on.
You just take it at face value, Scott. You take it at face value. A bank sends you an account, and you pay it because you don't know. And then the same applies to any agreement you sign. You can. What happens is when you apply for a mortgage, they say to you, right, fine. You put in an offer, whatever. And that offer to purchase whatever, they do a due diligence test where they check whether you're credit worthy, and after they've done that, they send you a letter to say, well, go and meet the conveyancer and sign the bond document, whatever. And you go in and you do that. And when you get in to sign your bond document, you are confronted by documents that are about 6 or 7 inches thick. okay? And they expect you in a half-hour meeting, whatever, to go through every fine point and understand, or take it away and then come back and sign at a later stage. Invariably, what a conveyancer will tell you is everything's in order. It's a standard agreement. There's a standard document, whatever. And you basically initial all the pages and boom, the next thing you know, your bond has been accepted or whatever. Now, that's all well and good, but there comes a time when you then get asked to sign a mortgage. You have to sign also a mortgage loan agreement. Now, this is pivotal to securitization fraud, as far as I'm concerned, because what happens is the banks take all the customers' mortgage loan agreements. That is the promissory note that you sign them, that you're going to pay them, and you're indebted to them or whatever.
Greg, let's get onto that. Let's get onto that side in a moment, okay? Because I just don't want us to step ahead of ourselves. Now,
okay.
Okay, so 5 years ago, you dared to question ABSA as to whether they still owned your alleged debt, didn't you?
Yes.
That is to say that the mortgage loan agreement, or MLA, ABSA alleged that you signed.
Yes, it's an agreement that they allege that I signed, and the reason I say allege that I signed is because when I went to summary judgment, the most interesting thing was they rocked up in their simple summons, and when they rocked up in court with the summons, the first thing they said, and this is very important, on page 1 of the simple summons, it says they cannot locate any of the original agreement documents, the MLA. They cannot any signed documents or even certified copies of these documents. All the documentation relating to any agreement I had with them has simply been lost, or it cannot be located in any of their storage facilities. Okay, now
right.
that is pivotal, because what happens with securitization is that they take a whole tranche of people's MLAs, your agreements, they bundle them together, they pool them together, and they sell them to investors through an SBI. Through an SBI. They sell your mortgage loan agreement to investors. They skim off every time you pay your bond, they skim off a certain amount of that cash for their own administration. They are no longer, the issuer is the one who has bought the MLAs. The originator is the bank. The issuer is the SPI. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. What you've got is you've got 4 parties. You've got yourself, the borrower. You've got the bank,
right,
who you you actually basically sign the loan with. What the bank does is it bundles yours and a whole lot of other MLAs
right,
that it's got, and it basically
right,
gives those documents to the SPI, which is a go-between between the bank
yep,
and the investor, who's actually providing the money for those loans to the banks. And because the investor is providing the money for the loan to the banks don't have any debt. So the banks cannot actually foreclose on you because your debt has been paid.
That's it. That's exactly it. You said it better than I could ever have said, Scott. That is exactly it. Basically, the banks have been paid. Your debt is actually extinguished. Your debt is extinguished because you don't owe the bank, basically, and your debt is extinguished. Tell you why. It's because the SBI, who may be holding on to the original MLA or whatever, the SBI has also been paid. They have been paid as well. The bank and the SBI cannot prove a loss in court. They cannot prove a loss. It's the investor who might be doing the losing, but the investor has got no recourse because the investor gets paid from the proceeds that the administrator of the bank acting as an administrator skims off the money and pays it through the SBI to the investors.
Right. Now, very importantly, this process is used not just for mortgages on houses. It's used for commercial loans. It's used for private loans. It's used for car loans. It's even used for credit cards. So if you're in default in any of those loans, They basically do not have a leg to stand on to try and claim that asset back. Am I correct in saying that?
Scott, all debt, as far as I can see, all debt to prevent the banks, to mitigate risk completely for the banks. All debts are securitized. Every single debt is securitized,
And
that goes credit cards, the lot.
Yeah, and the flaw in the process is that they hand over the original documentation to the SBI, which means they no longer have it. And because they've now actually transferred that debt to the SBI who provides the money, they can't all of a sudden, if someone forecloses, say to the SBI, well, look, we'll buy that mortgage back again, because that would be contrary to the directors and their integrity with the company.
Scott, now what is interesting here is that the SBI is ring fenced. It's called, the SBI is an RF. Okay,
yeah,
it's ring fenced.
Yeah.
That means they can't go back to the bank and say, well, you haven't honored your agreement, whatever. The bank is insolvency protected by the ring fenced agreement that they've got with the SBI. So the SBI basically has no recourse with the bank. But into the same fact, neither does the SBI, no, not the SBI, neither does the bank have any recourse on you either, because it's been sold completely out of the banking system, not the business of the bank. It's out of the banking system. Your debt has left the banking system and it has been transferred as derivatives, sold on the stock exchange to investors. I hope that also helps.
Yeah. Now, just so people watching understand how fraudulent this process is, back in 2007, the reason why the whole banking system nearly fell in a heap was because this exact same process of securitization, they might have called it a different term back then, was being perpetrated on people who took out loans. They didn't know this was going on. And that's when you had all these loans being given out in housing in the US, millions of them, and a lot of them went bad. And because of that, the whole financial system around the world nearly collapsed because of this very process we're talking about. And here are the banks doing it again, and they've been caught out. Please tell us your thoughts about that, Greg.
Okay, so that is an amazing comment, because you almost took the thing right out of my. You were talking about the 2008 economic crisis. Now, what happened in reaction is the Companies Act in South Africa issued gazetted a thing where they said the directors of companies, of banks, whatever, it's going to be their fiduciary duty to look after their stakeholders and their directors. Okay, and they must mitigate risk as much as possible. The same directive came from the Reserve Bank. The South African Reserve Bank gazetted the fact, it's called the exemption law or something, exemption law in 2008. And basically they said it is the bank director's duty to basically securitize their debt and take it out of the banking system so that we can protect our banks and avoid the chaos that happened in America and other places with regard to toxic securitizations. Does that also make sense, Scott?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
That's exactly what happened. The laws came out, and basically, if the bank, it's a dereliction of duty on behalf of the directors of any bank, of the board of directors, if they don't securitize, because the laws clearly say you are not going to put our banks at risk. You're not going to put our stakeholders at risk. You're not going to jeopardize our entire financial system. We want you to securitize. It's a recommendation. It's the ultimate risk mitigation for banking directors and to protect stakeholders. And that is in the law. The law actually says that's what you ought to be doing. We are recommending what you do.
Now, just so people listening understand that we're not talking to some Fruit Loop here. We're not talking to some expert in securitization. We're talking to Greg Smith, a real person who's taken ABSA Bank to the courts over this, and he's basically still in his house 5 years later because the banks are now on the ropes because of the action that you've taken. Now,
Amen.
I want to get back to an important point here, Greg. And you said at the very start, you said that the first documentation that you signed back in, when was it, 1994 or 1996?
96.
96. Yeah, in 1996. That original documentation is missing. Is that correct?
Oh, no, this is quite interesting. I have got the original 1996 documentation because I did it through Allied Bank. Okay.
Right.
I've got that documentation. I've even got the due diligence where they did a credit check. I've got the letter that says your application has been accepted, Mr. Smith. You're a wonderful guy and you're, whatever. And we're glad to have you on board. Now, that was in 1996 with Allied Bank. Allied, as you know, was a subsidiary that became part of the greater group, ABSA, when they joined all the different banks together. Okay. And essentially what has happened since then is that I've got a bunch of unsigned agreements. I took out 3 bonds altogether, according to ABSA, and I took out 3 bonds, and I have not got any of the original mortgage loan agreements with my signature on for 2004 or for 2007, which is my final bond that I took with him. Now, it's quite interesting. It was 2007 because that was right about the time that the financial crisis started. Okay? And their shenanigans with securitization started.
Yeah.
Well, in terms of my bonds anyway. I have evidence. I've got a forensic investigator who's done 2 years of investigation. So I'm just saying to you guys, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an expert on securitization, but boy, I've resorted to getting a lot of very valuable people in my team to help me try and get this issue out. And I include Loving Life in that, by the way, Scott. And here, Isaac Duvenaga of Izandu, for example, started an investigation where he went to ABSA and he said, look, I'm going to show you some statements of Mr. Smith's. Now, I've always been suspicious because at the bottom of the bank statements I would receive, it would say SP002 or whatever, CSP002, ML, and then a number like 08 or 07. Now, that is nothing more than, in my opinion, a special purpose vehicle number. In other words, it's an SPI number. And basically, that's the account that they are paying that they're paying the SPI.
Right.
Now, Mr. Duvenaga was to confirm that the codes I had at the bottom of my ABSA statements that I was paying every month, those codes actually pertained to or were linked to SPIs or the SPV. By the way, there's no difference between SPI and SPV. They're both the same thing. They just use different terminology to confuse the hell out of most people.
Right.
But here you go. So the codes were telling us, according to our investigation, these relate to securitization. They relate to paying an outside party, not ABSA. Therefore, ABSA Bank is acting as the administrator, collecting, skimming off money for their own administration and passing it through the SPI to the custodian of the investors. And in this case, it's Maitland Trust. And of course, that they get their dividends from the investments they make, but it's a very small percentage, 4% or whatever it is. And the other thing is, say, for example, they're allowed. No, I don't want to complicate things at this stage. Is that clear?
Yeah, no, that's
what
clear.
I've just said.
That's clear.
Okay. No, the problem is they make everything so incredibly complex. I don't know if you've watched the movie The Big Short, for example.
Yeah.
Now, The Big Short tries to explain securitization, but then it goes even further and it starts talking about what synthetic securitization is and credit default swaps. And what happens is these guys gamble against whether you're going to pay, whether you're not going to pay. They continue to circulate your MLAs and they sell them over and over and over because they've got the patent, they've got the copyright to do this. They have your MLA and they've got a patent or they've got a copyright for it and they can basically, when the one investor's paid up, they can sell it to another investor, and so it goes, and so it goes.
Now, just
And they get paid
to clarify that point, Greg, what we're actually saying here is that the original loan agreement you sign lands up with the SBI, and that loan agreement will be bundled up as part of the deal with the investor, and that loan agreement could actually be owned by a trust company in Wall Street. It could be owned by a Japanese funder.
It could be anywhere. In fact, there was a guy.
It's got nothing to do with ABSA.
No. I mean, there was a guy, an ostrich farmer called Ash Davenport. He paid an overseas researcher to find out who had his actual agreement, or whatever. And he found out it had gone all the way to Taiwan. I mean, the researchers have found that these documents have been sold as many as 500 times.
Wow.
It goes on and on. And then not only that, if you watch The Big Short, for example, you would see how guys would bet against you not being able to pay your loan and defaulting, and they get paid out in full anyway.
And this is where the scam gets really evil, because the interest rates. Let me just finish here, Greg. Because the interest rates are so low, the commercial interest rates, in some cases, banks are actually being paid to take a loan. It's called a negative interest rate. If you take R1 billion loan, they're actually getting paid interest, even though they're the lender. Now, they are then, with that SPI loan, they are then actually charging you interest when they're actually getting paid to actually borrow that money. Am I right in saying that?
Wow. Nothing surprises me, Scott, about the way these guys go, the way they operate. I mean, there are so many. There are loopholes in the law, for example. I mean, here, let me get back to just my case, for example.
Yes, go ahead.
Let me just say this. You would think that the average customer like me, and I'm an advertising guy, I'm a writer, I'm a whatever. You'd think, okay, I'm an honest guy, I'm prepared to pay a debt you say I owe you, whatever. I just want to know one thing, and this is what I said to ABSA for 7 months before they took me to court. I said, I just want you to give me an affidavit that you haven't securitized my loan. You have not sold it to a third party. I want it in affidavit form because it may be used in trial if it ever goes into court. And you can, whoops, hello.
Yeah, we're here.
Guess what happened. Oh my God.
No, you're all good.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
And you can guess exactly what happened, Scott. I mean, what happened was they basically refused to give me an affidavit. Wow. And then they said to me, this is what they said. They said, don't worry, Mr. Smith, we will send your original bond documents and title deeds, original, okay, I've got it in writing, to our lawyers in Durbanville. Well, I wrote back and I said, I just want to remind you, I want to see the original. And this is what I'm trying to tell all your viewers here, what you need to know. I want to see the original with my wet ink, with the wet ink signature. I want to see that agreement, because if you're in possession of that, then I will continue paying my bond. I'll continue paying my agreement with you. Okay. And what happened was, at that point, they said, fine, you persist with your allegations, which aren't true, whatever, we'll see you in court. And then they rocked up in court, and you can guess what I'm about to tell you now. They rocked up in court without the original agreements. The judge threw them out. The High Court judge, Mark Scher, threw them out for the simple reason that he had a problem that they did not attach the original agreements to the affidavit that said I owed them all this money.
And those original agreements could be somewhere in China, or they could be somewhere in the United States of America. So they've got deadliest chance of finding them.
Yeah, but you know, it's interesting. I've got the judgment here. I wish I could read it to you. But anyway,
can you send me a PDF of it? Can you send me a PDF, and I will put that below the video in the description later.
Okay, that will be. I will send you a PDF of the actual judgment.
Right.
Because the problem, the judge said, this is what the judge said in summary judgment, and I think it will help your viewers too. The first thing he said is, I don't know what Mr. Smith actually agreed to, because there's no signed agreement here. It's just a recreated, and I call a recreated document fraudulent. It's a recreated document that is, you did this. Now here comes the next step. The next step is the original summons, by the way, was signed by a vice president of ABSA Bank, a vice president. And he said he has personal knowledge of my account. This is very important for your listeners, your viewers. He has personal knowledge of my account, and he can swear that I'm trying to delay the whole thing, but I owe them this money. And he certified the debt as being whatever it was at the time. Now, what is interesting is, how could this guy have had personal knowledge of my account when there was no signed original agreement available? It wasn't there. And then there are other things as well. Okay, I'm just trying to think now what it was. But he basically also ignored the fact that, for example, they don't have amortizations of the first 2 years of my account. Now, if you don't have amortization of the first 2 years of my account, how can you have personal knowledge that all this money is owing the bank? They have simply sucked it out of a straw and they spat it on a page. It's ridiculous. And this is how the banks operate. And judges often make an error of decision because some high-paid silk comes into the court. And he says, no, here are the documents, even though they are counterfeit, even though they are fraudulent, even though they're recreated. And the judge makes an error because he believes, no, you must owe the bank. And you, as a defendant, make the error by saying, yes, I owe you. Oh, yes, I agree to this or whatever. I agree to this debt. You must not do that, because that is not necessarily the debt that you owe them after you've done clear audits and clear investigation into the whole securitization thing.
Now I just want to bring a bit of context to what we're talking about here. Roman Dutch law says,
yes,
and this is actually in the other ABSA ruling, Roman Dutch law says that when someone pays back your debt, it doesn't matter if it's done by fraud or whatever it might be, you no longer owe a cent. Now, this is the difference between the US law and the law that South Africa has, which is Roman Dutch. Now, what the banks in South Africa have done is they've simply taken the process that's used in the US under their law and just dumped it into South Africa and done the same thing. But under Roman Dutch law, as I said, if someone actually pays your debt, which happens as soon as the SPI puts that money in and pays off the person you bought the house from, the bank is not party to that. So the bank, you owe the bank nothing, and that's by law. Carry on.
Okay, you have already, I've seen on your website before, you've already put down a PDF of the judgment for ABSA, ABSA versus Burke. That's what that case was all about. And it was a constitutional case. Judge Cameron ruled. And he basically, he said it doesn't matter whether the person's aware of whether a third party's paid or not, because that's another issue with securitization. You're not aware necessarily that someone else has paid your debt, because they are allowed, because they allowed to keep a cloud of secrecy for some strange reason. The Reserve Bank regulations and the banking laws allow the banks to remain silent about their securitization practice. They don't tell you necessarily that they're securitizing your loan or selling it to a third party. So you continue paying them, but you're not aware that somebody else has already paid your debt through securitization.
And under Roman Dutch law, that excuses you of the debt.
Yes. It's all about that ABSA versus Moore. That was a groundbreaking case.
Yeah.
It's fantastic that you brought it up, Scott. I never thought of it to say it now, but you did. It's fantastic.
Okay, well, that's the whole basis of this thing, is that they try to use a system that's used in America, which is a totally different legal system to the one that we're under, which is Roman Dutch law, which is why it's flawed, which is why it's fraud when they try and go after you and foreclose. It's fine while you're actually paying, but as soon as they try and foreclose on you or do something against you, that's where the problem happens, because your debt has already been paid.
fabulous explanation of how that fraud begins there. It's brilliant. Yeah, that's exactly it. And therefore, it's unlawful, fraudulent foreclosure. And by the way, the fraud aspect extends to concealment as well. So there's fraud, which is also concealment. They haven't told you, basically. That's another thing. You're not always aware. So there's that aspect of fraud as well. And then there's a whole... Sorry?
Yeah, and just for those people watching, we've got about 350 people watching at the moment. Just for those people watching who say, well, look, I actually did take out that loan with the bank, and, you know, I feel bad if I don't repay it, and da-da-da-da-da. Now, we're not saying stop paying your loan, but if you get into trouble, and especially we're talking about what's happening during this COVID time, the banks are completely mercenary. They will take everything you've got. They don't care. This whole process is barbaric. Now, all we're doing is we're saying to you that you don't have to give your home back. You don't have to give your car back. You don't have to have them bankrupt you over a maxed out credit card. This process is fraudulent that they have put in place. And all we're doing is exposing it. So if you're in that position where you are now compromised because you can't pay back your loan, you have an answer. And there's a precedent there which is already in the courts in South Africa. Please, back to you, Greg.
Yeah, so basically your debt is actually extinguished. Okay, it's been paid, it's extinguished. And once you've separated the mortgage loan from the bond, and the MLA agreement has gone out of the system. But basically, the mortgage bond itself is actually null and void. Funny enough, it's null and void. It's not attached to an agreement. The agreement's been paid. It's settled. In actual fact, before the early 1990s, Scott, when you paid up your mortgage bond or whatever, when you paid it up in full, up to the early 90s, they gave you a cancelled bond and a cancelled MLA, and they gave you back, hear me out, your original title deed with your deed of transfer, your name. That was up to the early 90s. Now, I very much doubt that anyone who's paid their bond off already to the bank after that period would have gotten back the original documents or whatever, because those documents are still out there. And that's basically what I'm saying to you. Those MLAs are out in circulation. They're out through the SPI. They've been converted to derivatives, and they're sold and synthetic securitization, and they continue to be sold over and over, gambled with, over and over. That is what.
It's incredible that, you know. Okay, let's for the average bloke, you know, who's just wanted to buy a house, their loan document is being used like a pokie machine. It's been you know, money passed in and it goes out and it comes out. Someone else picks it up. The whole thing is complete and utter fraud.
It is. I don't even know how to describe. Some people have said it's a Ponzi scheme, it's a scam, but to me, it's like you're a gambling chip, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And this is the same process, just so everybody's aware, that nearly brought down the whole banking system in 2008. Exactly the same thing.
Yeah. Selling these toxic securities.
Yeah.
Whatever.
And people, there was one guy in America who actually shorted the whole process. I don't know how you do that, but he made billions of dollars when the whole thing fell down. And
it's all about.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the short, the movie. Watch it.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
It's absolutely amazing. Now, okay, now let's just move on a bit from here. Now, South Africa's just gone through a huge ongoing pandemic. Foreclosures and repos are set to increase. What COVID relief do banks give customers?
Okay, now listen to this one. I find it hilarious, okay? There's all this brouhaha about what the banks are going to do to help the COVID situation. Let me tell you, people out there, the banks gave nothing to you but more debt. Because this is how the banking holiday worked. we'll let you off your loan payment for 3 months. What we are going to do is we're simply going to recapitalize with the interest for those 3 months. So when you come back from your payment holiday, you now owe them more debt. They've given you zilch. And that's the truth. Okay. That's what they've done.
Just again, for people listening, you got to understand the banking system is corrupt. It's corrupt all the way through. They're trying to strip you of all your assets. So look, if there's a way, if you're in trouble, you can give them the middle finger, grab it, and just do it. Because it's about time the banks were brought back into line. They're completely out of control. Great.
By the way, Scott, I need to make a comment that's going to be fairly contentious, I think, because I'm sick and tired of these banks being called banks. And I'll tell you why. The whole story is when you get a home loan or whatever it is, the money is coming from the investor side through the SBI to the banks in order to buy a whole bunch of tranches of derivatives, basically.
Right.
They capitalize. By sending that money through to get the derivatives, they are capitalizing the bank. So the bank is not relying necessarily on deposits from customers. It's actually getting a lot of its capital in to lend to other people who want to have home loans or whatever through the investor. And therefore, they become a financial service provider. Not in the old days, you went to a bank and they gave you cash or they gave you notes that carried their weight in gold or whatever. These days, they basically just type a bunch of figures on a computer based on whatever money has come through from the investors and been converted. And now we convert it to derivatives and we take the investors' money, basically. And that's what they're doing. And then they lend that capitalization that they get, recapitalization, every time they get money from investors. And the investors say want to buy 10 billion or whatever, in comes 10 billion rand that they can then lend out again to guys who want to buy or borrow or whatever. And I find it quite interesting that, I mean, there's a guy called Emerald van Sale. I don't know if you've heard of him at all. He's posted stuff on the internet as well. He made the claim the banks don't lend you 1 cent for your home loan, not 1 cent. They are simply an agent, and they simply get the money in from another source and other sources, and then they facilitate the loan, and then they administer the loan. Now it's a very interesting claim.
Right. Now, just again for people who just joined us, Greg Smith is not talking out of his where, because Greg Smith has been fighting ABSA Bank for 5 years now, and he's had wins in the court over this whole issue. And he is still living in his home that the bank tried to take off him 5 years ago, because he has shown in the court that the foreclosure process is fraudulent. And I just want to bring up this question at this point in time, Greg. What can you, now we're getting close to 400 people watching here, what can you as a bank customer or borrower do to defend yourself from a bank wanting to foreclose on you or take your house off you?
Okay, now look, it is fairly complex, but what we're doing with you, myself, and a bunch of other activists, whatever, we're finding ways where, it's becoming more surefire. But what I would suggest is the first thing you want to do is to confirm to yourself that they definitely have sold your loan to another party. The first thing you've got to do is ask them to show you a notarized copy of your bond, or show you the original MLA with your signature on it. Very important, the MLA, because it's the mortgage loan agreement that they've actually bundled up and sold out of the banking system. So they won't have your original wetting signature, and they cannot create, by the way, another document like that or copy it and say it belongs to them, because that becomes security and wire fraud. Okay, it's a whole number, and that's huge. So basically, I'm saying you ask them to show you the original wetting signature documents. And then secondly, just to confirm a second point, you say to them, well, look, you say you haven't securitized my loan, because a lot of banks say, what? We don't, no, we haven't securitized your loan or whatever. Fine. I even know of people who have had emails sent to them by the legal department of the bank saying, we have not securitized your loan. That's fine. So I said to this guy, if you got that email, then why don't you ask the head of the legal at this bank, ask him to send you an affidavit to that effect. And of course they refuse.
So the affidavit is the key thing. Okay, guys. So if you've got a default with a bank and they're going after you, just send them an email and ask them for an affidavit confirming that they have not securitized your loan. Is that correct?
And by the way, and ask them to produce the original mortgage loan agreements that you signed. Ask them to do that.
And also the original loan agreement that you signed. And if they won't give you the affidavit and they can't give you the original loan agreement, you're basically home and hose, aren't you? Because we already have a precedent in the courts.
Okay, now just to follow that through, now this is the most fantastic excuse I've ever heard. Okay, most banks out there would simply say, sorry, but we lost them. I mean, I've got friends, one of the banks said to him, there was a flood or something, right? Now, wait for it. So ABSA Bank, I think in 2009, they had a 2-day fire in one of the most secure storage warehousing facilities called the DocuFile facility, okay? So ABSA Bank send notes to all their clients saying, we're terribly sorry, but we can't give you your original documents or whatever because they were burned in a fire. They were burned in a fire, in a document storage facility fire. Now, I've got two responses to that. The one is, okay, I don't know quite how to say this to you. It was burned in a fire. Well, that's fine. But surely you've got other copies in other facilities that are certified, notarized, or whatever, not just the original documents. There must be stuff that's on file in different locations where there wasn't a fire, where there wasn't a fire. Am I making sense here?
Absolutely. I mean, if you've got a computer at home, the one thing you do is you back it up on an external hard drive. So the same thing applies, that you make a copy of this very important document and store it elsewhere.
Of course. And by the way, my investigator and a number of other people have established for me that the DocuFile facility is one of the most secure Fort Knox type of storage facilities where a fire can't possibly start.
Right.
I realize that, for example, the security system was turned off during the time. How could they have allowed all these bond documents simply to burn? Now, this fire story of ABSA's has been hugely discredited. And I've seen in some court papers, it's been termed an uncelebrated fire. But the fact of the matter is, this is a crime scene that needs to be investigated. Are there fire records, for example? Did the fire brigade actually come in and turn off the fire? Or was this, you know what I'm getting at? Or was this just a smoke and mirrors story to try and get out of saying we don't have the original documents, they were all burned in a fire?
Right.
But now it's interesting because I've also got an article that was written by Kieran Ryan in 2016 after ABSA's summary judgment application was dismissed in the Cape High Court. And it's called Knockout Blow for ABSA in the Cape High Court. You can Google it. You don't even have to look for a link. Just Google Knockout Blow for ABSA in the Cape High Court. And in this article, there are links to the DocuFile fire story, and very interesting parallels with what happened in South America with the company Iron Mountain, I think it is, who are another DocuFile affiliate or the DocuFile parent company. A whole lot of documents got burned there as well. So it seems to be a very convenient excuse that these mortgage loan agreements and bond documents are all getting burnt to smithereens. And therefore, ABSA can rock up with recreated documents and say, well, you still owe us, for example. When we know
a recreated document does not carry your signatures, so it's irrelevant.
Correct. No witnesses, no signature. No, there's no signature. There's not even a bank person's signature on that.
And just be clear, Greg, that's why you talk about the documents with a wet signature being the original signature by you.
This blue pen, you've signed the document, boom, 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 and that blue pen is on that document, and you can say, or it's a certified copy or notarized copy where a guy has put his, he's put his neck on the line and he said, I certified this is the absolute copy of the original or whatever. But they cannot produce that. The problem.
Okay,
That's
so
why
now,
they produce something.
so just to cover back to this point again. So someone who's in default right now and they're being threatened to be taken to court by the bank, what they need to do is send an email to that bank's legal department and say, A, I want an affidavit confirming that this loan was not securitized, and B, I want to see a copy of a certified copy of the original loan that I signed. If it's a credit card, if it's a housing loan, a commercial loan, or whatever.
Yeah, better still, show me my original document. I said to a guy the other day, I had a vehicle loan with another company. I said, ask them to show you the document you signed just the other month where you got a loan from them for your vehicle. Ask them to show it to you. And the chances are they won't be able to give him the original document with his signature. Because I'm not sure what the regulations state, but I think it's after you made your first payment or whatever, then they can securitize. Do you know what I mean? They can securitize.
You've got to make the first payment and then they can securitize. Yeah, so that actually kicks it off.
Scott, I know that you're the host here, but I need to bring up another question.
Please,
where are all the watchdogs and regulators who are supposed to be protecting us against these banksters?
Exactly.
Where are they? Let me tell you something. I've got something here. There's a case that of a guy who's dealing with ABSA. He went to the SA Human Rights Council, and they wrote to the head of legal, and they said, we recommend that you redact your sales agreement, which this guy's got a copy of. He's got a copy of the sales agreement where ABSA sold all these loans to the issuer homes. Okay, but the problem is the collateral listing in that sales agreement, and I'm talking about tens of thousands or whatever of bonds are in that thing. It's the original sales agreement in 2008. It's worth about 3.42 billion rands worth of securitized loans that ABSA has sold to homes. Now, there's a collateral listing that goes with it. It's all the mortgage loans and the accounts that have been securitized. But it's encrypted. It's impossible to see or read what these encryptions mean. They are apparently, according to my investigation and my investigator, these codes are actually account numbers for homes themselves. Homes have got this as collateral. They know that this code means this guy, that account. So that's the level of secrecy in this agreement. And what I'm saying to you is the South African human rights people actually wrote to the head of ABSA Legal and said, we want this guy's name redacted from the list. We don't want to know all the other people on the list. We just want his name redacted so he can prove that you don't own his debt and you can leave him alone and stop trying to steal his house, basically. That's what the intention was. It was a Human Rights Council recommendation, and we got documentation to support it. I got a letter from the South African Human Rights Council saying they would appoint at some point a legal person from SHRC to actually assist me, possibly. I've heard nothing since. I wrote to the banking ombudsman. The banking ombudsman simply said, no, we must let this thing have ventilation in trial of the matter. The same position that ABSA seemed to adopt is, we'll see you in court and let a judge decide whether what you're saying is right or wrong. Now, you and I, this is grossly wrong because it involves copious amounts of time, energy, and financial resources to mount a case against Goliath when you're only a little guy.
Yeah. Well, look, I should just put in a personal situation that I'm aware of. And I worked in Barclays Bank, which became FNB. I worked in Barclays Bank from 1973 to about 1981. And what happened is that I left the bank because I was leaving South Africa. But a very good friend of mine, his name is, I'll just call him Eddie. I'm not going to give out his surname. But Eddie was a bank manager up until, well, re 1994. And then, of course, with BEE, he was basically retrenched. Okay, so he had to leave the banking system. He was then contracted. This is in KwaZulu-Natal. He was then contracted to go to different branches of Barclays, or FNB as it became, to go and fix up the mess that had been made by the new black bank managers when it came to the loans. They were filled in incorrectly. The whole thing was a complete chaos, as he said. That was his job. He was actually contracted to go to, Kokstad, or to go to Escort, or and all he ever did was had to fix up the mess in the loans that these new managers had put together.
I'm not sure it's racially related only, because I can tell you now, so many of the cock-up letters I've received are actually from people of Caucasian extraction or whatever.
They're probably from head office.
A lot of this, yeah. But I've dealt with a lot of very incompetent people in the banks, and occasionally you
poorly
get
trained. But the point I'm making is that this guy, Eddie, was a very highly skilled bank manager, and he was retrenched. Not because he retired, he was retrenched because of BEE. And then he was contracted to go and sort out the mess. So this is my point. And it's not just that the securitization thing is a complete fraud, that those loans go to head office regardless of where they're actually drawn. They might be at Kokstad or Ekopo or Greytown, doesn't matter. They all go back to head office. That's where the fraud happens. That's where they're packaged and sold on. Yeah.
And they get that's the other thing is when they sell when they securitize and sell these loans. I mean, the banks. If you've watched The Big Short, you will realize that the ratings agencies actually get told by the banks almost how they should be rating these bonds. AAA, AA, whatever.
Yeah. What they do is they put a few AAA bonds in there, and they put a whole lot of junk in there, and then they rate it AAA.
There you go. It's insane. I mean,
it's fraud all the way through.
I mean, you can imagine now. I've spent 5 years. I mean, I've had an investigator for 2 years working with me. I've had a team of excellent people, including Ben van der Poel, by the way, and Herman Dormel and Bennett Benjamin, who's a very, very good lawyer. I've had help from the legal aid, even though I didn't qualify. John van Onselen from the legal aid in Cape Town helped me with my initial summary judgment stuff. It's just fantastic how people can work together. That's the other thing, guys. You're not alone. You must tell all your viewers, I tell you, all of you, you're not alone. The more we talk to each other, social media is causing this revolution as well. Because the more we can stand up collectively and say, enough is enough, guys. We are not going to take your fraud, your robbery, your money laundering across the earth. I mean, all of this money and whatever, and all these assets and things are going through Cayman Islands or Mauritius or wherever.
Exactly.
Another thing you've got to put my article up on your site is the one that goes, the ultimate COVID relief package for homeowners with home loans.
What I'll do is I'll put the links to your articles below the video in the description. Yeah.
Yes, because I'll tell you why. In this day and age, that has got everything in it. And basically, that article even talks about, you asked me earlier about what relief do the banks give you, and we showed they just gave you more debt. But in actual fact, what we need is massive protest, massive exposure to say to the banks, we want you to come clean, can come to the courts with clean hands and say you don't own the debt. It belongs to someone else. Declare the creditor. Now, there's another very interesting website out there. It's called Telling Lies. It's an American website. I've listed it as a link on my article, The Ultimate COVID Relief.
Right.
In Telling Lies, they say, if you cannot name the creditor, there is no debt. No creditor, no debt. Now, that's another interesting take on the situation, because it's very often very difficult to define who is the creditor in this particular instance.
It moves around so much.
Well, it moves around so much. So that's the other thing. And the other thing is we know already for a fact that investors have no recourse at all because they are buying shares on the stock exchange. They have no recourse whatsoever. The ring fence thing protects the bank by the SPI and so on and so on. And remember, folks, I'll remind you, the SPI and the bank cannot prove a loss. Neither of those two parties can prove a loss.
Because
Not
the
1
money
cent.
came from the investor.
Money came from the investors. They've been paid. Your debt's extinguished. Your mortgage bond is null and void. Is null and void. Wow. It's been a long 4.5, 5 years, I can tell you.
I was about to say, no, okay, I'll just say this once more. The fellow I'm talking to, Greg Smith, is not talking out of his where. He's been involved in this battle for 5 years now, and he's still sitting in the home that the bank wanted to foreclose him out of years ago. And the reason why he's still sitting in this house is because the courts agree with Greg.
That's a fair comment. I mean, I wish I could read you the judgment. I've got it somewhere here. I'd actually highlight it.
Yeah, just send me the PDF and I'll put it in underneath.
Yes, I will.
Yeah.
Okay. But I mean, okay, never mind. I mean, when the guys make an oath, they've got to make an affidavit. Basically, you ask for that affidavit. That's the important thing I wanted people already said.
Right, you said that, Joe.
I'm just having a look here quickly. I mean, no, it's fine. I'll send you a PDF of the judgment. It's quite lengthy.
Now, where are you at right now with ABSA? Because they're still trying to scramble themselves out of this, aren't they?
Well, this is quite interesting because there's a set-down trial where I'm going to have to defend myself if I cannot find obviously I'm fairly financially strained at the moment. And I've got to find a generous legal team who would be prepared to assist me on contingency, even pro bono, whatever, and take all the information and documents I've got and hammer the bank. So I'm looking for someone moral, ethical, and basically a soldier for truth who wants to be part of this revolution. Because I'm supposed to be going to court on the 2nd of June this year for the set-down trial to defend myself against ABSA. If necessary, I'll stand up and with the help, I'll take a brief from the people I know and basically stand up and defend myself. But the thing is, I really would like this to be a groundbreaking court case where there are no loopholes and these guys get hammered. I want them to be hammered. And I want this the trial to expose and help other people in a similar situation. Remember, Scott, over 100,000 people since the new constitution in South Africa began in 94, over 100,000 people have already lost their homes. And when we talk about, and that would be, and I would suggest that 90% or even more is actually illegal or unlawful foreclosure based on the securitization laws. Very important thing to remember.
Right.
So basically, and with the COVID thing coming in at the moment, it's escalating. The foreclosure fraud is going to only escalate because the banks will continue getting the presiding officers to make errors of judgment based on the wrong documents, recreated documents, whatever, and basically hiring top silks who who talk the talk and whatever, and the judge thinks. And then the other problem is very often a defendant doesn't know how to defend themselves at all. They're quite clueless. And then what do they do then? Now, if you haven't got the resources, if you really are poor or whatever, and you're below the threshold, whatever, you can go to the Legal Practice Council and you can ask them to represent you pro bono in the case. And then you can also go to your local legal aid and ask them to give you a hand. But you have to meet certain criteria. You have to have assets, or your value of your property has to be under a certain amount, etc., etc. It's designed to help the poor, really, essentially. But so those two places you can approach. The Legal Practice Council. I think there's also a place called the Legal Resource Center. So there are a number of bodies that you can talk to. But the thing is, how do you explain as a layman what the situation is to lawyers who maybe don't understand the complications and complexities of securitization?
Right.
And all these.
Well,
this is my other.
These live streams are certainly getting the nitty-gritty out about the whole thing. Now, I just want to ask you a simple question here. You won your court case against ABSA. okay, about this foreclosure thing. Now, what basis are they taking you back to court on? And clearly, if you are to win this thing on the 2nd of June, this is going to put a huge hole in the banking system in South Africa, because based on your win, you're going to have a lot of people who have been, the banks are trying to foreclose on right now, taking in your court document and saying, show me the affidavit, or give me an affidavit saying that you didn't securitize my loan, and show me the original copy or certified copy of the loan agreement. And banks are shitting themselves about that. So why are you before the courts again?
The other thing I believe you are tackling and have already tackled is factor prebrantia. Okay, the fact that you don't necessarily have to prove securitization, but the laws definitely point towards dereliction of duty if the bank directors don't securitize. It's absurd to suggest that they don't securitize their loans, because the Reserve Bank and the banking laws, the Company Act, have clearly said it's your responsibility to protect your stakeholders and directors as bank directors, and therefore you must securitize essentially. That is what the laws are suggesting.
Right.
So there's a lot there. You are covering all of that in other interviews and things like that.
We've got another interview with Ben in a couple of weeks, and it's part 2 of his discussion on this.
Yes. Ben van der Poel. You should put me on the program with him. I promise I'll be quiet while he talks. Okay.
Okay, we might do that. I'll speak to Marlena. She's the one who makes decisions like that. Now,
I want to make a quick plug.
Yeah.
That article I wrote. It's why I want you to put it on your site, whatever. The one, the ultimate COVID relief package. Okay. Right. Guess who helped me edit it and gave me? Guess who edited it and gave me a lot of input? Ben van der Poel. Okay.
Well, there you go.
Great guy.
Well, look, Marlena, we need to get Greg on with Ben in our second part of the discussion over this fraud by the banks in South Africa. And I'm calling it a fraud because clearly it is. Now,
Scott, can I make one more?
Yeah, I've got a bunch of questions here for you from people watching. We've got about 400 people watching at the moment. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, one request. Can you please ask everybody watching here to share this video on social media and make sure everybody, all of their connections, gets to see it, so we can make sure that hundreds of thousands of people get to see this.
Well, anyone who's got a loan in South Africa should see this, because they need to understand how they're being misled.
That's my point, guys. Spread the word. Spread the word, because everybody's under pressure from the banks, for sure.
Yeah, they're sitting there. You know, the banks used to have such integrity. I remember when I worked for Barclays Bank back in the early 1970s, and, you know, the bank manager was like the most respected person in the community.
Yeah.
That's changed.
Yes, Scott, that's a beautiful, it's almost like Pleasantville, you know, the way you're thinking about that. You know, hello, Mr. Brown, the bank manager of Brown Bank, you know.
Yeah. And it's gone. Did you ever see that little video clip where this little kid goes, puts some money in, and the guy taps on the keyboard and he says, I'll put it in here and do that and the other and the next. And he talks back to the kid and he says, it's gone. And the kid says, what's gone? He said, your money, you've just lost it. That's basically what the banks are like. Okay, now I've got a bunch of questions here that people have asked. I'm going to put them to you and we can discuss them. Rosalind Gerber was asked the first question I saw. She said, if you default, can the credit agency still blacklist you?
You see, now I am not a credit authority, but I would imagine that you go onto a list of, you will go onto a blacklist or whatever. But the interesting thing is, if a matter is sub judice, okay, it's now in court or whatever, and it's yet to be decided whether you're guilty or not, then they can't blacklist you by law. You cannot be blacklisted if the case is ongoing and a judge has still got to make a decision on it. Okay, right. So if it's a legal case, if you simply default, It's quite interesting you asked that question, because the first thing I did when I said, okay, if you're not going to give me, if you're not going to give me an affidavit that says you didn't securitize my loan, I'm not paying you. And that's what I did. Now, the thing is, I've got no doubt that for the first couple of months, they might have blacklisted me and I would have got a bad credit rating or whatever. But the point is, from the moment that you are now in the court system and that you got through summary judgment or whatever it is, then they have to wait for the judge to make a decision. And you actually can demand that the blacklisting be taken away. I don't know if that's a good enough answer.
Well, I think the problem that the lady might have is that if you actually admit the debt to the debt, that is then your admission. So it kind of puts you in a different position.
Okay, sorry, I'm not. I was just thinking about, in default you go, whatever. Yeah. Okay, no, you don't. No, you're not admitting to anything. If you go into default, you're not admitting that you're in default necessarily. I mean, I for example, went in at summary judgment stage, and I said to the judge, I don't know what I signed. I haven't got my original agreement. I don't know what I signed. That's what I told the judge. And I'm not certain whether I actually owe the debt that they allege.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was part of
my. So basically.
Basically, your defense is that I can't remember what was originally discussed, and you can't, because they give you a huge big document. I mean, you can't remember what was in there, and you just say, well, look, unless they can provide the original or certified copy of the original loan agreement, I can't accept this default.
It must be the signed document, because any other document could say anything. And it's not applicable. It's not applicable.
It's not the original, exactly. I mean, I can't believe that they think they could get away with that. Now, Charlotte Smith has asked, don't the bank take the money you own from money credited in your account? I think she's talking about taking the money. If you're in default, they just take it automatically from your other bank account.
Oh, okay. Now, that to me might be a difficult one to answer, because there are new laws pertaining to garnishing orders and all that sort of stuff at the moment. I wouldn't be able to answer that question directly, but I would be loath. Are you asking that you've got credit in another bank, a totally different bank?
No, same bank, but in a different account.
Then you know what I would do? I would simply move all the credit and the money that you got in another account to another bank.
Yeah.
So that you protect it. So
well, I can tell you that one of our family, he received a donation to help his family through during the COVID thing last year. And the banks put their fingers in the pie of his account, took the money out and paid off his arrears on another loan. They actually took the money out.
Well, that just shows you the nature of the beast, basically. I mean, I don't know how to answer Ms. Smith's question, because at the end of the day, I would just suggest that you keep various accounts isolated and remote. Yeah. You know what I'm getting at? As the banks do with their ring fence company, whatever, the SBI, they protect themselves from insolvency. Do the same. Don't let banks take. One bank is not going to give money to another bank without your instruction or without your authorization.
No,
so I would take any credit.
Just on this particular subject, people need to understand that the entire banking system, that includes ABSA, First National Bank, etc., is owned and controlled by the money power. Even though it's a local bank, it still is owned basically by Wall Street and by the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, who see people as what they call goyim, or cattle. They don't see us as human beings. They see us as cattle. They see us as an asset that they can clean up. They have absolutely no moral interest in your situation. They just clean up as much as they can. So, don't feel like, oh, I shouldn't do this because, the banks have helped me. The banks do not help people. The banks only help themselves.
That's a very good slogan, by the way, for a bank that's honest. We help ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, these little ads they put out there saying, we're helping the community. And what a load of BS.
And
Okay.
and what's the other one? We care. We really care. You know.
Okay. Now Nat Quinn has said Greg's article can be found on the forum under COVID-19. Okay, so guys, if you go to lovinglifetv.com and go to the forum link at the top, and then go to COVID-19, you'll be able to see the link to, or you'll be able to see Greg's article in the forum. So that's the best place to see it. Okay.
Can I just give
go ahead,
Scott? What is brilliant about that article is it starts off. The first paragraph says, "Without your knowledge, your mortgage loan has already been paid, and your bond is null and void." Now that's a great opening line to make you want to read on, I think.
Absolutely. Okay, now I've got a question here from Nat Quinn. Are there any banks in South Africa excluded from this corrupt bunch?
Oh, you know what? I listen. Is this whole program is without prejudice? Okay, let's just say that for now, without prejudice. Anything we've said on here cannot be used in court. I have a spreadsheet of securitizations in South Africa that I received from a source, okay? And it literally lists, and I'm sorry, I'm going to go the whole log. I think I may have sent you a copy of that spreadsheet, Scott.
Yeah, that's the ABSA securitization.
Ben van der Poel said that I can distribute it. There's no problem with it.
Right, and it clearly shows who the SBIs and investors are.
Okay, now this list lists trillions and trillions of rands of securitization. And it starts from A and it goes to Z, if you want to get the drift of what I'm saying. Every bank, insurance company, every SPI is listed on that list. You have to have a look at that list to believe. There are even government pension funds, municipalities, and other things where they sell the debt.
Yeah.
Not even the banks, not just the banks.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
No, I mean, I'm beginning to think that all debt is being sold. I mean, you've got Americans that are buying Russian debt. I saw that on television. Russian bonds.
Just to answer Nat's question, I think Capitec is probably one of the only banks do Capitec give loans, or do they just have savings accounts?
Scott Capitec have just started out in the home loan market. Okay.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure. Yeah. So, by the way, I am with Capitec, and I am very happy with Capitec. I would just want, in fact, they were the one bank. I just wanted to say this quickly. They were the only bank that told me on an ATM that I can draw money for cheaper if I go to Checkers or Pick and Pay. And I thought, wow, this is a really honest bank, in that regard. So I changed my bank. I went from one bank, I went to because I was tired of the higher fees I was paying. And Capitec are a fantastic bank. I'm not just giving them a plug. They've got a good reputation, but they also, unfortunately, are in the securitization business. And by the way, Scott, we must say this to the people. Securitization, in good practice of securitization, is legal. It is legal because of the Reserve Bank regulations and because of the Companies Act making the suggestion. But it's what we call the darker motivations, the criminal motivation of securitization, those loopholes where you can get away with something, where you can get money out of the country and you can then return it to the SBI, which is money laundering. All of that. But I'm saying there's a dark, bad practice, but in essence, it's supposed to work nicely and honestly, but it doesn't.
I remember Ben saying that the reason they do that is because it minimizes their tax payments.
Yes, it's a tax haven. I mean, basically, they get the money out to a tax haven. Yeah, okay. But now, can we not see what great corporate citizens we have? Because the taxpayer, in my opinion, is allegedly being robbed.
Yeah. Look, they'll do anything to pay no tax. So that's how the Rothschilds and Rockefellers work. They think they're above the law. Now, okay.
all these names, Scott. I just want to say, I mean, you're a brave guy for what you're doing, running this thing,
Well,
Anyway.
Marlena said this securitization is so massive. Why don't we treat it as a contributing channel? Then people can go right there when they have problems. That's a fantastic idea, Marlena. I will get Rudy to put all the videos regarding the subject, the live streams, into a special contributing channel on lovinglifetv.com, because that sort of facility is not available on YouTube. So we'll do that on lovinglifetv.com. We'll have a contributing channel called Securitization Fraud, and people can go and then view all the live streams we've had discussing the subject, so they can become aware of their rights. Sorry, back to you, Greg.
Securitization, yeah, legal and unlawful, or whatever, I mean, because everything, well, how about everything you need to know about securitization or whatever it is? And the other thing is, the other thing is we could put some really good other links that other people have done, share that on your channel as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We could have links to your documents and stuff like that as well. Absolutely.
Yeah. And there are some there are also a number of cases on securitization on ax.co.za. That's where my article Knockout was placed.
Right. Okay. Now Desi Miller has asked, Scott, NetBank sent me a copy via email. How could I know if it's a wet copy of the contract? Now, I guess the point is that if it's got your original signature on it, then it's an original document, isn't it?
If it's got your signature on it and it's a certified copy, I would imagine that's a copy of the original. But again, how long ago did you sign that document? That's the question.
Desi just asked that question. I have no idea. Desi, if you're listening, if you can just let us know when you signed that document or that contract. Okay. Now, Rosalind Gerber has said, has Greg contacted Reyno de Beer from Liberty Fighters Network?
Oh, that sounds good. Yeah.
Have you not contacted Reyno?
No.
Okay. Well, look, Marlena, can you put Reyno de Beer in direct contact with Greg? Because that's a very good question, Rosalind.
Reyno de Beer from
Liberty Fighters Network. He's the guy who took Dlamini Zuma to the High Court over the regulations and won back in June last year.
Okay. Wow. Okay, look, that's a very good recommendation. Send me the link, please, Marlena, please. That'll be great.
She'll send you his cell phone number so you can speak to him.
Wow. Okay, good. Thank you very much for that.
All right. Now, I think we've pretty well covered everything, Greg, haven't we? I mean, the point is that we're speaking. This is for the benefit of everybody watching right now. And please, guys, remember to subscribe to Loving Life on YouTube and to register on lovinglifetv.com because it's not just a YouTube channel. It's going to be South Africa's largest news source on the internet. That is our goal. And one of those aspects which Nat Quinn and the side chat has been talking about is our forum. And on our forum, you will be able to go to the COVID-19 link and pull up the documents that Greg has been referring to there. So this is why we're able to add so much meat to our stories, because we are not just a YouTube channel. We are a real news platform now, quite unique. Michaela says, oh, okay, no, that's just, okay. All right, guys, I'm going to start wrapping up this live stream. Greg, I want to thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about how the banks treated you and how you fought back. And I just want to say congratulations, because, you know, what you're doing, they might in 6 months or a year's time be quoting ABSA versus Greg Smith, you know, and saying, well, in this court decision, da-da-da-da-da. So you might find your name coming up all over the place after this.
Well, you know something, this is the funny thing. I have never approached this thing as glory to me, blah, blah, and all that. I've realized that it's only through collective effort will we ever get anything done. Anybody who thinks they can be the lone bloody gunfighter who's going to take on the entire OK Corral is crazy. These banks are so big. The only way we can get it right is if we spread the word, we work collectively, we help each other as much as we can to defeat this monster. That's the real thing. We need protest action. We need civil action. We need to pressurize the government and treasury and government and the banking regulators. Why should, for example, the banking regulator, the Financial Services Conduct Authority, tell me that this case needs to be taken to a criminal charge level? Why can't they just look into the allegations of fraud, racketeering, theft, and all the things that were pointed out in the case reports and affidavits that my investigator found about the banks? Why is it left to the little guy like me to go and defend himself in June 2020, to defend himself against a bunch of high-paid silks in the High Court, and just be left to defend myself, when in actual fact, people, the regulatory authorities could do something about this and say, we need to clean up the Banking Act. We need to make sure our guys are ethical, and that we need to try and re-regulate the securitization regulations to prevent the loopholes and the abuse that we've been suggesting and alleging tonight.
Right. Thanks, Greg. Now, just as we wrap up tonight's live stream, please remember to share this video widely, because we're talking about a subject that affects just about every person living in South Africa. And they need to be aware of their rights, which the banks will never tell you. Greg, is there something you'd like to say in conclusion before I wrap up the live stream?
Well, basically, I've always wanted to say, in the case of ABSA Bank, for example, I've always wanted to say, you know, you use words like integrity, stewardship, respect, in terms of how you treat customers, whatever. I'd like you to actually live up to your grandiose promises when you talk about being customer-centric. Maybe this applies to some of the other banks, but I'm talking about my case. Don't tell me you respect, you have integrity. I mean, Daniel Manelli, the CEO of ABSA, has just recently left ABSA. He said, integrity begins with me, and I lead the ABSA way, and I expect my directors, whatever. And there's a whole thing in their code of ethics that talks about how he leads. Well, he's just left. I'm hoping that ABSA's new and next CEO will step up and say, Greg, we're sorry. We want this to go away. We want to sort things out. We apologize for all the inconvenience. That's something they say sometimes. We apologize for the inconvenience, but we also want to make recompense for all the suffering that you and other customers have gone through. And what we're going to do is maybe, and I'm telling you, maybe this is a suggestion, maybe we can write off some of the debts. Maybe we can help some of the poorer people who can't afford their bonds or whatever. And maybe we can rethink whether we want to throw more families out in the street, more families out in the street. A Lenasia family got thrown out by ABSA because they were 1,000 Rand in arrears. It was on carte blanche. It's been taken off the site. I'm saying it's time for the banks to step up, to show some real respect, real integrity, real service, some excellence, some stewardship, and actually step up to the plate and take responsibility as corporate citizens for people in a very difficult period during this pandemic, where evictions and bad debt and all these things are on the increase, because we are moving towards chaos and revolution if we don't. And that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Greg. Now, I just want to thank Greg so much for coming on and you know, chatting to us, because as I say, he is a real living example that you can fight up, you can fight back against the banks. And, you know, that's a huge target he's taken on. All right, Greg, thank you so much. I'm sure we'll catch up with you again. I'll speak to Marlena about the suggestion of coming on when we have Ben back. And you take care, buddy.
And thanks to everybody for watching. Yeah.
Okay, cheers, mate.
We got to go now. Cheers.
Okay, guys. I just in wrapping up, look, I just want to make it very clear to people, because this is a sensitive subject. I just want you to be aware that the banks, their biggest goal is to enslave you with debt. Once they've got you as a debt slave, you are basically under their control. And this is why I personally have absolutely no debt to any bank, because I understand. I worked in the banking system. I saw what happened even back then in the 1970s. And my appeal to people is, if you can, if you got a credit card, pay it off every month. Don't go over, because as soon as they've got you in their claws, they're going to try and screw you so badly with fees and late payments and stuff like that. This is how they work. They are mercenary. They are not working in your best interest. And you need to understand that. And the reason we're covering the securitization and the fraud that the banks are involved in when they try and foreclose on your house is because you should have no mercy towards the banks, because this is a war all about money. And the banks have been winning hands down until these foot soldiers like Greg have come out of the bush and said, hey, we're not going to take this. And this is why we are publicizing this here on Loving Life, because we want you to know your rights. And we will continue to follow this whole case and alert people to what's going on, because wouldn't it be wonderful if you had a total precedent where the banks literally could not enforce you paying a loan if you fell in default. Now remember, it only becomes fraudulent when you are in default. While you're actually paying, that's okay. But if you can't pay, that's where the banks are in the poo, because they have put themselves in that position through their deviousness. So don't feel like, you know, oh, I shouldn't do that because it's not the right thing. Believe me, the banks have never had your best interests in mind. Just think about it. Okay, guys, I'm going to wrap up there. I'll leave the side chat open for a few minutes. Please, as I said just now, please remember to subscribe to Loving Life on YouTube, and please do visit lovinglifetv.com. You can see it just below my finger there. Hang on, let me get this right, just there. This is where we're moving. All our videos go up there. We've got an archive of 7,000 videos from the old Loving Life 2020, Loving Life itself, this main channel, and from Loving Life Live. Two of those channels were taken down by YouTube for community strikes, but we've archived all the videos, and they go back for years, and you'll be able to search on them. It's going to be a huge repository of old videos. And of course, we have there the forum as well, which is fantastic. We have contributing channels. We're talking about having a contributing channel just about securitization. So if you've got a problem or the bank is coming after you, you can go to that contributing channel on lovinglifetv.com, and you can listen to experts talking about what your options are. And isn't it better to be forewarned with knowledge than to go into a fight with a bank not knowing what to do? All right, I'm going to leave it there. Have a great evening. As I said, I'll leave the side chat open for a few minutes so you can say your goodbyes, and take care. And tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Johannesburg time, we have another live stream. We're here every night at 8 p.m. And of course, if you're an early bird in the mornings, we sometimes talk to Peter. In fact, most mornings I talk to either Petrus and I talk to Jarrett, who are both walkers, who have their own missions that they're participating in. And we talk for normally about half an hour in the morning. But you'll see that in the Loving Life Live channels or Loving Life Live streams that are coming up. Okay, guys.